Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm from Jenny Card Designs. Thanks so much for stopping by to spend some time with me here today. My YouTube channel contains content that is intended to share paper crafting, tutorials, and inspiration with all of you. I hope that you enjoy. Today's video features something that I don't quite often do. I am by no means an artist of any sort. I just like to have fun. So today I'm going to be trying out some watercolors. I have this watercolor paint set that I picked up from Amazon. It was cheap, it wasn't expensive. It's 24 colors and the company is called Mozart. I think these are some decent quality watercolors for the price, which was under 20 bucks. I've got some Primo watercolor paper and it's some nice quality paper. And then I've also got this stamp set by Gina Designs, designed by Lisa Hetrick. And this is the Hello Beautiful stamp set. I've had this for quite some time. I've used it multiple times. I'm not sure if I've ever used it in a video, but it's a very well-loved stamp. I love the florals in this set, and I just like how whimsical it is. So today I'm going to be doing something totally out of my element. I'm going to be doing some no-line watercoloring, and I'll show you how I do my sort of cheat way around that. So let's get started with today's project. So initially when I pulled out this stamp set, I thought I was just going to stamp some floral arrangements and maybe color them with some markers. And so I thought I was just going to heat emboss this jar on a regular piece of cardstock, and I pulled out all of my embossing powder things and loaded up my jar on a large acrylic block and started to stamp it. And I thought, I think I want to change my mind. I want to change everything that I was planning on doing. I didn't really have too much of a plan other than stamping and then just kind of see what happens. And then I decided to grab my Primo watercolor paper that I showed you in the beginning. It's on a block, it has gummed edges, and it's all kind of stuck together in this thick pad. So I need to take my craft knife and sort of make some slits to help me lift the watercolor paper off so that it doesn't get damaged. So I cut down a 5x7 panel and I loaded up my jar onto the door of my MISTI, and I just pull out any of the air bubbles that might be stuck in behind that stamp. Use my anti-static powder bag and stamp this with Gina Designs embossing and watermark ink. And I stamp it a couple of times to make sure I get a good solid impression. And then I have the Gina Designs Fine Detail Silver embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that over my stamped image and heat set that until it is smooth and melted. And then my jar is complete, and that's going to help me when I'm trying to watercolor to contain some of the water that I'm going to paint inside of that jar. And then I have a bunch of acrylic blocks, and I grab some of the images and I just sort of load them up. I kind of put them on both sides of my block so that I can stamp multiple things at once without having too many blocks on my work surface. So I've got 2 Distress Oxide inks, I've got Tattered Rose and Bundled Sage, and I'm just going to start stamping around, just creating a random floral arrangement. I'm not worrying too much if the florals are touching each other. I'm trying to not let them touch, but if they touch, that's okay because we're going to watercolor anyways. The reason I use the Distress Oxide ink is because it reacts with water. And then when I paint over top of it, it looks like an artistically painted piece, I think, anyways. So I stamped some of this greenery inside of my jar so that my flowers don't look weird, like they're just hanging around the top of the jar. I wanted to make it look like the stems are inside of the jar, and you'll see more of that later on. So here's a close-up look at my stamped image so far. And now I'm going to grab my watercolor set, and I've got a couple of brushes. I have a number 1 brush and a number 3 brush, and they're both round. I also have 2 glasses of water, and I've got my paint set, and I just use the lid to mix up my colors. And I'm just going to go to town. I'm just going to start painting in my image. I'm not really too worried about making it look professional. I'm just having a good time doing what I think looks good. I'm not very good at the whole shadow thing. I have a really difficult time trying to figure out how to make a shadow so that the image looks like the petal looks folded up, or which part is supposed to look closer or further away. That's just too complicated. That's not me having a good time. I want to have fun, so I just paint. I just take my colors, mix up stuff, paint in the flower, add in some shading. One tip I do want to give you when you're watercoloring, work on one piece at a time. Work on something and move away from it and let that dry. So you want to work on one portion at a time. And here I'm just mixing up some of my peaches and my reds for my flowers. And then we'll go in and paint those flowers. When you paint your image, you'll notice you can get a flat wash of color. If you drop more color in over top, you can intensify it, but you won't get any detail. It'll just sort of melt into each other. So if you work on one little area at a time and let that dry and then come back to add in your detail, you'll get more of a defined effect instead of like a mushy melted together rainbow pattern. I don't know if that's really a thing. I mean, that's just kind of something I figured out along the way, just, testing out these watercolors and painting my piece. I have never in my life done this no line watercoloring before, but I've always wanted to try to improve my watercolor skills. And I steer away from them because I want it to look as good as everybody else's, but it never does. And I really had some troubles with a couple of those little flowers. I kept trying to go back and add the detail, but they were still wet and it wasn't working out. So I brought in my heat tool. I sped up my drying process a little bit, and I added in some black lines to the center of these flowers to produce a stamen. And I was pretty happy with it. I mean, for the first full-on watercolor piece that I've done, I think it's okay. It'll pass. No one's going to complain if I hand this off. So I added a little bit more leaves in the neck of the jar to make it look like, the flowers were connected to something. There was a little bit too much white space there and it kind of looked weird. So I did that. I added in some more leaves and I painted over top of them. And then I added a few detail lines inside of my jar because I sort of lost a little bit of that detail. So it's okay that you can't see the detail perfectly because the water should muddle that a little bit. So I just kind of added in a little bit more color there, and then that's it. So I had fun with this watercolor set. I mean, like I said, for $20, I think it was pretty decent. If you're just new to watercolor, this is a great place to start. I mean, pull them out, have some fun, enjoy yourself, don't stress out too much, and whatever happens, happens. So I'm going to take this panel and I'm going to adhere it to a card base. I've got a 5x7 card here, and I just trimmed my panel down a little bit. I used a bone folder to help me combat some of that warping. And then I stamped the hello from the same stamp set. And I used some VersaFine Onyx black ink. And then I used some score tape. I used the big, I think it's 5.5 inches, something like that, 5.5 inch piece of score tape, and covered my whole panel to make sure it was adhered good to that card base. I have a few scuffs on my panel. I just used my Couture Creations Creative Detailer tool. That's a mouthful to say. I just use that, buff them off, and that's it for this card project. Project complete. I really had some fun with this watercolor. I mean, it's nothing spectacular. It's very beginner level, but I mean, hey, you can't improve if you don't try. Okay, so that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it here with me. Coming up on screen are a few videos that I think you may enjoy. Have yourself a lovely day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!